Thanks, Phil, for the intro. I want to now move to Representative Lynch. Thank you for joining us today to discuss fintech and public policy. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule.
Oh, happy to do it, and I look forward to the day when Garry, when we can get together in person and have a full and fair discussion of all the issues. This is an exciting area. It's obviously the reason that I asked to be appointed chair of the FinTech task force, but the velocity of change is incredible in this area. I think the pandemic has changed the pace in which some of these technologies have been adopted. Very helpful in some ways, but with some vulnerabilities in others. So really eager to engage with your group, the American FinTech Council, and just the individual constituency that you represent as well.
Great. When we look forward to working with you as well. I mean, one of the things you and I have discussed before is, trying to create a floor so that all members and all policymakers are sort of operating from the same facts and the same amount of information. And I know you've done some work with MIT on that. I just wondered sort of what your perspective is, where we were when we started and where you think we are today and where we need to go.
Right. Well, ironically, I had originally arranged through MIT, and Garry Gensler was over at the Innovation Lab and was teaching at MIT. We had arranged a fintech boot camp, fintech and blockchain, crypto. So with the pandemic, however, that got pulled down, and now, alas, Garry Gensler is chair over at SEC. So there are other ways that I think we can accomplish that same goal of educating members, and I think that would help us enormously. With getting members up to speed and getting behind, initiatives that the industry has identified as being crucial, foundational, if you will. So like digital identity, things like that. We need a fuller and deeper understanding among members in order to get some of these initiatives passed.
Right. And obviously trades like ourselves hopefully can play a role there, and some of our members. Obviously you're in the Boston area. Some of your constituents may or may not be aware that we even talk about words like fintech, but they obviously use our products. Just wondered what you hear from your constituents, or from your perspective, what is working and what is lacking for them.
Well, interesting. Not surprisingly, it's generational. So I have a very young district, especially the Boston area. The real estate developers tell me that the average person moving to the city of Boston is a 23-year-old woman or man. So that group, that cohort is not using the traditional banking system. Even my own two girls, one of them just graduated from college, one of them is a senior. I can count on one hand the time that they've been to a bank to do their business. I think just to get traveler's checks for spring break or something like that. But anyway, so I see that difference between where we have been and where we're heading. And so fintech is the heart of that, really. How do we bring those traditional services in a new and better way, while integrating that into some of the legacy legislation, if you will, around consumer protection, around investor protection, around privacy, things like that. So it's really that's really where the challenge is, to make sure we bring the best in fintech, which would include inclusion and equity among our citizens, and banking the unbanked that we talk so often about, but also, from an industry side, reducing those pain points that we see in the traditional banking system, that drive some of those costs out, and just make our system faster, seamless, if you will, and again, providing services at a much higher level.
Right. Well, you sort of mentioned the regulatory framework, which obviously, and at the last hearing you were talking about, we obviously do have ECOA, we have Lynch, we have an upcoming rulemaking from the CFPB. We have a whole slew of things that are adjacent to or address certain components of this. But from where you sit, where do you think we need to move? Is it partly we need new things? Is that we need to adapt what we have? Is it also we need to just move faster from a public policy standpoint? What from your seat, what do you see as the things that need to yet be done?
Well, our statutory and regulatory framework really was established in response to crises, right? The BSA, coming out of the Depression or any number of financial crises that we've had during the history of this country. That sort of has, Dodd-Frank, Lynch, all of those initiatives came out of responses to vulnerabilities and weaknesses in our financial system. So those fears are still out there, and the interests that they serve are still prominent. As I said, security of financial information, privacy, and fairness, inclusion, equity. All those issues are still top of mind, in our society. So we've got to get this right. However, we've got this mismatch in terms of the pace at which technology is changing and the pace at which Congress moves. I swear we would still be wearing powdered wigs, but for the fact they went out of fashion. We are very slow and plodding. We're built to be resistant to that change in a sense. The power of precedent, the power of the incumbent industries sometimes act as a check on the change that we need. So we've got to be able to move more quickly. The 1033 rulemaking has taken much longer than we anticipated. And really, digital identity is a foundational concept that really underlies a lot of what we're going to do in the future. I think if we can solve that, I think there are examples out there. I think GDPR might offer some examples. I think other countries have struggled with this as well. So I think there's an answer out there, but we've got to move much more quickly than we have been. I don't think it's wise to wait for the perfect solution. I think we should try to move forward, even if it were with a regulatory sandbox, to try some of this out. I think that might serve us in a much better fashion than the way we're progressing right now. I know some other countries have gone forward, and those efforts have failed, but I think that they gained knowledge and experience from that. I think the scaling issue is big with some of these technologies that that may take a longer time in terms of trying to solve. But I think there are a lot of good ideas out there right now. We just need to have some use cases and some commercial examples where we can identify progress and feel that comfort level, to make those products public. I think the payment space has done relatively well compared to some of the other sectors. I think that Stripe and Square and others have really, I think, brought that streamlined and customer-facing type of development and technology that is easily usable, and so they're outpacing. Maybe it's the nature of the payment space, I'm not quite sure, but they seem to have gone further than other areas. And if you look at, say, lending, fintech lending, we've made progress there, but we saw in the CARES Act and in the American Rescue Plan Act. I think fintech was at a disadvantage because the way we put it out, the $300+ billion that we put through the SBA, there were not strong relationships between our fintech lenders and the SBA. I think many in the fintech sector looked at the SBA as being slow and stodgy and paper driven, and all of that is right. However, when we gave the SBA the authority to issue the loans and the relief in terms of over $300 billion, fintech found their way to the SBA and made those relationships, which was good. And fintech provided, I think, 15% of the funding that we put out through those relief plans. However, within that 15% that fintech handled, we had 75% of the fraud of the entire program was through fintech lenders. So it showed us some vulnerability. We got to be better about this. And I think it goes back to that digital identity. I think that would serve the industry and consumers as well.
Yeah, I think the PPP program is going to be a great use case, looking back at what banks, credit unions, CDFIs, fintechs, governments could do better, what worked, what didn't work. I think banks are very good at serving their existing customers. The entire infrastructure is built around, do you have a deposit account at this institution? If so, you now have access to X, Y, and Z. Where fintechs predominantly see everyone as a consumer and then try to provide that consumer with a service. And so, the research shows that also that we were able as an industry to be more a part of the access component of the PPP program, where we were able to lend more predominantly to minority-owned businesses, to rural areas. And this was true also of small banks, where you have this similar type of challenge where we can go to places where the biggest institutions aren't, and there were some small institutions there. At the same time, if you're going to serve someone who's not your existing customer, it is going to mean that there is going to be more difficulty in managing fraud and speed. And I think this gets back to digital identity too, of, I worked on TARP. I got to see no fraud and no speed. And that ended up not serving anyone. And so, be interesting from your perspective too, how did you think about fraud versus speed and getting money to people? Same thing we saw in the unemployment insurance system, right? There was a lot of fraud, committed against states, but also the states were working with old systems to try to disperse those funds. And as we think going forward, what you think some of those solutions are?
Well, I think there were some lessons from the CARES Act and the American Rescue Plan. Number one, the first iteration that went out there, we saw large banks favoring naturally their longtime clients. They had business relationships. There were not the digital identity issues that fintech faced. But on the other hand, it was the people who had long-term established relationships with big banks, their favorite customers, that got helped. And it was fintech really who came in the second iteration and said, okay, we're going to try to do this on a more granular and equitable level. So that was great. The problem was that some of the weakness. Let me just include Congress as well. We're handing out blame. We were pushing money out in a big hurry, right? And so I own that. We were struggling. We saw this incredible slowdown because of the pandemic as it spread out. Boston was hit pretty hard. We had a convention where it was a super spreader event. So we were scrambling to try to get relief out to people who needed it. And that's just the way it was. So we did not give, it was far less than ideal in terms of giving fintech companies and lenders the ability to sort of transition. The money was shoved out there in a very, expedient fashion. saying, look, we just got to get it out there. We know we're going to make some mistakes here, but let's just get it out and help the most people. So those factors, obviously put FinTech at a disadvantage, the speed at which we did it. And we were asking them to service some of the, the customers that we had less information on. So it invited some of the problems.
Yeah, I would say my experience from TARP was, and this was instructions from Secretary Geithner, was, we have to put out the fire. If that means that you end up having water damage on the house next door, or you have, these various unintended outcomes, your number one priority is to stop the fire. Do whatever it takes within the law to try to address this crisis. And what I would say is, I really, looking back, for all the talk about the Congress and others not being able to get things done, or, the financial services industry and regulators being slow. On the other hand, if we look back, it's quite remarkable that we were able to move with such speed as a society. And also, having lived through the crisis in Dodd-Frank, I think a lot of the systems that were put in place by Dodd-Frank made financial services industry a source of strength in a crisis, as opposed to a source of contagion. And so I'm not trying to always be the glass half full, but I do think there's something about the crisis and who is able to be deployed. The question is, there's always things we need to learn. And to your point, payments and digital ID, the ability, for example, the government to get payments directly to people. Obviously, we have a lot of work to do there. And it also how it bounces through the banking system and whether it gets to people in the way that it needs to get there. But for me, maybe it's because I was so jaded from the 2008 crisis. It was like, oh, wait, like we actually were able to get money out into the economy very, very quickly, out onto Main Street, into small businesses, in the hands of consumers. But it's clear our infrastructure across, public and private, we need a lot of work there. You'd mentioned payments. I wonder if you had a view on, obviously the Fed is moving forward with a program, and private industry with the clearinghouses as well. Do you have any views about, sort of how that could or should land in terms of, building that infrastructure, the balance between the public and the private?
Yeah, that's one of the areas that we've got to have some consensus. We really do need that. That would provide a lot of clarity, I think. I know that there are a number of initiatives going forward. Some of the banks have got together about standards that they would like to see adopted. I know that Chairman Powell has been extremely welcoming in terms of getting feedback from the industry, and they've got the greatest minds working on some of this. We do have the experience of others that have tried to create an infrastructure in various ways. So I guess that's just that I'm going to have to wait for others on that. That's way out of my, I'm an engineer, but some of this stuff is beyond me. I'm trying to catch up, but in terms of the design of our infrastructure from a fintech perspective, I just think that there are some things that the private sector does extremely well, and working off those individual platforms, whether it's Ethereum or a blockchain type system, scaling remains a big problem. But there are other API platforms that seem to be more friendly to developers, and so if they can use those platforms to just look at the pain points in the current system and figure out a way around those, or to eliminate them, I think the private sector will show us the way. What we're struggling with is some of the gaps in terms of privacy and of financial data, and making sure that everyone is included in whatever system we move forward. We have seen a concentration, at least so far, in some of the technologies that have come out. We would hope that from an equity standpoint, we might be able to correct some of that.
Right. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. We really are grateful for you taking out time today, and hopefully we will get a chance to meet up in person soon and work together, both our individual companies and as a trade, because I think, this is something that both the private sector and the public sector have to work together so that Americans have a system that works for them.
Well, thank you, Garry, and thank you for giving us Davina. We really appreciate that. We are working. We've got a hearing on the task force coming up next week on some of the buy now, pay later products and how that might better serve consumers. But if you or any of your constituents, businesses that have a particular interest in certain areas, we're more than happy to sit down and hear their thoughts. Like I said, this is a learning process for all of us, but we certainly welcome your input and your expertise. Thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.